humans, Alison and Toni here from BlueLion. Today we are going to talk about some HR jargon and some terminology that usually gets mixed up and messed around. So we're just gonna kind of set the record straight here.
Today the three words that we're going to kind of clarify is the difference between a furlough, a layoff, and a reduction in workforce. Ooh, what do those three things mean? Oftentimes, I think we have certain things we hear, we've seen something in a movie, and we think that that's the word that we should be using, but it's not always accurate. So I think it can give people pause or concern when they hear some of this language and what's going on. So the first word that we're going to talk about is furlough. So a furlough is generally when an employer is doing a very short-term shutdown of the organization, whether it's 2 weeks or 4 weeks or a mix of any of those things, or one particular week in the year. We've seen employers do that the week between Christmas and New Year's to give their employees off that time frame. I've seen different employers, depending on different seasons, do it 2 weeks here or there during just super slow season when they know that their employees can be off.
So it's normally a planned time. It's a cyclical thing or something that's common in your industry, whether it be landscaping or things like that. So it's a period of time, a short period of time in which you're typically going to be shut down.
One thing that we do want to caution people if they're going to be doing furloughs, and actually any of these particular things, but furloughs is to start, is if you have an exempt employee. So for us watching at home, an exempt employee is an employee that under the Fair Labor Standards Act gets paid a set salary every single week, regardless of how many hours they worked or the quality of work that they're producing. So for exempt employees, I would say be careful if you think you're going to furlough somebody in the middle of the week and then they're going to go on an unpaid leave for a certain period of time, because that is not in guideline with the Fair Labor Standards Act. So you want to make sure that you're paying employees for the full week if they're exempt. Hourly employees, of course, come under a little bit of a different guideline, but paying attention to when a furlough happens is really, really important. One of the things that happens when an employee furloughs are generally unpaid. So generally employers are allowing their employees to go unpaid for, like Alison said, a very, very short period of time. So that's how that particularly works. Now, what if you have vacation time? Employers absolutely can say that employees can utilize their vacation time if they want to use it, but they're not required to do so. They're not required to say you have to use it or you have to save it or whatever it may be for a specific furlough time frame. You can say it's here for you if you want it. If you want to help offset some of that cost, if you have the time saved up, maybe you're really good at scheduling your time off and you can utilize that time during that cyclical time of year.
The other thing, though, that is required is employers must maintain benefits for these employees while they're out. So a lot of us commonly think of paid time off or vacation time as part of your benefits package, and it's really part of your compensation package. So when we're talking about benefits here, under a furlough, the employer must maintain benefits. That's going to be your medical, vision, dental, those type of benefits. Those do need to be maintained during a furlough.
And there's a bunch of different ways that you can manage the deductions with that, and we have other videos that talk about how deductions work if an employee is on a leave or a furlough or some other kind of absence from the organization, how to collect it, how to maintain it, and how to record it. So we were able to share that information in another video, so make sure you look for that video if you're wondering how that works.
All right, so next we've moved on from furlough. Let's talk about layoff. So layoff is a little bit more severe. It's more unexpected, I guess.
And it's probably the most common phrase that gets misused. So I think a lot of people think layoff means I'm fired. My employer has got rid of a huge portion.
I've been laid off.
I've been laid off. A layoff actually is really very different. So this is one of those things, the news, the media, the movies will say, oh, like I know George Clooney did a movie once with he laid off a bunch of people in the airline industry. A layoff is actually a lot different in the HR world than how they try and explain it to you in a movie. So a layoff is actually also a set period.
Wait a minute. The movie's got it wrong, Toni.
It's not everything on the internet's true, except for this. Except for this. So a layoff is actually also a set period of time. So a layoff is a much more longer period of time than a furlough. A furlough, like we said, is a shorter period of time, a week, 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. A layoff is a lot longer. So a layoff could be months. And we see layoffs in mostly very specific style industries. So we see this generally, like Alison said, in landscaping industries, in construction industries, especially in New England, when the ground freezes, no one's digging. So construction industries aren't paving generally in the dead of winter. So they do layoffs for usually 2 or 3 month time frames, but there's an intent to recall those employees back to work for us. So that's a huge change. So a lot of people say they're laid off, they're going off, they gotta find a new job, they're not getting called back. It's not the case with a true definition of a layoff. There's a recall. So I say, hey, Allison, you know, we're slow because it's our slow season. We know this comes. Again, also very cyclical. We're going to let you go on a layoff. We're going to recall you in 8, 9 weeks, whatever it may be, and so on and so forth. At this point in time, Allison gets to claim unemployment. So because she's out with a return to work date, so that's a really, really, really important piece of it. She has a return to work date. We want to call her back. We need to call her back. That's part of the layoff process. So she's able to claim unemployment. She's able to have a return to work date, so on and so forth.
During this time too, your employees actually would have the option to take their time off paid. So if they do have any accrued time off, any vacation time or anything like that. Now this is depending on how your policy is written. So definitely if you don't have a policy, you're going to want to reach out to us. In the state of New Hampshire, if you don't have a policy, you are required to pay it. If you do have a written policy, then obviously it's how your policy is written on whether or not you would be required to pay it. In the state of Massachusetts, you are required to pay any accrued time off. So they would have the option. So some employees choose not to take it at that time because they do have that recall date. So they want to hold on to their time off so that during next season or when they return to work that they still have some time in their bank. But that's going to be the option of the employee at that time on whether or not they're getting paid for their accrued time off.
100% true. And the difference here too is also benefits. So we talked about how paid time off is really more compensation. What about benefits? Health, dental, vision, things like that. There's a couple different ways during a layoff that can happen depending on the extension of how long the layoff is going to be and how the organization has planned. So I've seen construction organizations that do a really great plan and they know that they're keeping their employees for 30 out of the 52 weeks. So anybody who's on the benefits, their deductions are planned for a 30 work week time frame. So they're collecting enough benefits to cover them during the other weeks that they're not there. That is not mandated. Teachers another excellent another excellent example of that. It's not required though. So if you are not going to keep them on benefits, you would need to COBRA them. So it is not required under law to have them on benefits like the furlough. You need to maintain benefits on a furlough. On a layoff, you get as the employer the choice. If you're trying to keep the incentive to have the employee be recalled, it's great to keep them on. Depending on the different cash flows, that is something your organization gets to decide. So deciding if they're going to keep them on benefits or not. If you are not keeping them on benefits, you need to comply with COBRA. So making sure that you're notifying them within the timelines, the guidelines, and you're giving them the information so that they can hop onto COBRA with the extended period to pay for that at 100% plus any administration fees. So that's a really important piece of a true layoff as well.
Mm-hmm. And the last one we're going to talk about today is a reduction in force or a reduction in workforce. So this is what George Clooney would refer to as a layoff.
Yeah.
So this is actually when you're reducing your workforce. You have no intent in having this human come back to work for you. So it's in essence a termination. A lot of times we'll see this with employers that for economical reasons are having to reduce the amount of employees they have. Perhaps it's two companies that have merged together, so they're going to simplify, get rid of HR, not have two HR departments, not have two accounting departments, and they're going to actually do a permanent reduction. So the key here is it's permanent. There is no intention to bring these employees back. So it is a true reduction in the workforce.
It's a permanent termination is really what it is. And that's why I say this terminology and the terminology of a layoff are most commonly confused because a reduction in workforce is a permanent termination from the organization. So that is when you need to comply with all the state mandates with paying out vacation time with a specific amount of time on the last date of employment. You would COBRA the benefits based on whether it's the last day of work or the end of the month. You'd make sure that you're letting the employee know that they're eligible to collect unemployment through the state, depending on whatever the waiting period may be. But it's a true layoff. So not layoff. I'm sorry. It's a true termination. So you're not bringing these people back, like Allison said. You're letting them go for whatever reason, whether it's economic in your business, whether you're compiling two teams together, whether you're trying to just downsize for what other kind of information is coming into your cash flow or whatever may work. But this is a real termination, that's what I like to call it. So paying attention to the three different words, termination, which is the reduction in workforce, a layoff, and then a furlough. Knowing how to handle the compensation, the unemployment, the benefits, any other kind of information when it comes to vacation time, sick time, that's really important for all three differences.
Final pay too is something that's also going to take into account when you're doing that reduction in force. So making sure you're keeping up to date on what's required when you're terminating an employee. We get a lot of questions on that. So make sure you know what the regulations are in your state, because when you are doing a true reduction in workforce, you are going to fall under those guidelines of a termination. So make sure you're paying attention to those as well for their final paycheck.
Yeah. So we hope that the three things that we have gone over today have helped you and clarified some of the information. Also help you when you're communicating with your employees. If you're really using the right terminology and you use the word layoff, you probably see fear in people's eyes because they think I'm getting fired. And that's not necessarily what you're trying to communicate. So being careful with the words you use, because you're not always being perceived in the way that you think you're sharing the information. So we hope that this has cleared up some questions for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section.
Yeah. And make sure you are liking and sharing our video, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
What is this? You have a bust? What are you doing? You're like
No, I'm
getting your
my hair.
goatee?
My hair out of my mouth.
Oh.